For the first time in years, Prescott's housing market isn't favoring sellers. It's balancing. Prices are softening. What happens over the next few months is going to shape the entire real estate market in 2026.
And here's why the shift is catching so many people off guard. Prices are down double digits. Homes are sitting longer, giving buyers more incentives to negotiate and getting steeper discounts on their purchase. And builders are even bringing back secretly some incentives.
I'm Shawn. This is Tiffany. We're your local real estate experts here in the Prescott area. We help people buy and sell every day all across the Prescott area and the Quad Cities. And our goal is pretty simple: help you understand what's really happening in the market so you make the smartest move for your situation.
So at the surface level, things look calm, right? It looks kind of like a sideways market, not really favoring either side. But if you take a deeper dive and you look at the numbers, you'll see that the prices are actually down year over year about 13%. And we're seeing an average time on market of 60 plus days. So this equates to, like I said, bigger reductions in price when you're negotiating on your home. We're seeing more incentives. We're seeing some sellers, if you're financing, offering closing cost concessions and also offering rate buy-downs.
Some of the stats get a little confusing because you'll see that closings are up in September of 2025 from, they're as high as 124 closings, I think we saw in September, which is up from 82 the same month the previous year. And that would show you that the market is starting to move, but it's kind of one of those times in the marketplace where I think we've hit the bottom for sure.
Yeah.
And as we move towards the end of 2025 into 2026, we see a few more rate drops that are bound to happen with the interest rates. By the time you realize it, the bottom will have already passed.
This is true. Absolutely. And we're also seeing, with the days on market, right? People and sellers are starting to realize that they may not be pricing where they should be, and they should probably be coming to market at a lower price point than they initially were thinking. So I think that's also helping the market.
Well, and I think we should talk a little bit about the shift as a regional shift. It's probably more nationwide than, not a one-off of just the Prescott market, right? So we're seeing these trends across the entire country, but you'll see that as we kind of dive into some of the stats, the smaller regions within or smaller specific zip codes within might actually show that they're doing great and might have seen some appreciation year over year, whereas others have seen double-digit declines.
Absolutely. I think another thing fueling this surge more towards the buyer side than a sideways or neutral market. A lot of people are relocating from higher cost of living areas. And when a starter home in your area is $1 million and you're a first-time home buyer and the interest rates are what they are, it's going to slow your ability to sell your home there, which then in turn slows your ability to relocate and buy a home here, right? So I think that's also adding fuel to this fire. Okay, so Yavapai County is down about 8.5%. But if you look at a map in Yavapai County, it's an enormous area. So I think something that's important to keep in mind, this is a balance of the market, not a crash. It's not doom and gloom. It's not, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, everything's going to bubble and all that other nonsense. That is not what we're experiencing. It needed a correction of some sort, right? It was just go to the moon with prices. And I feel sellers are starting to catch on to that. They're now learning that they need to price for this market in 2025 and
not the market from 21, 22.
Yeah, not adding, my neighbor sold the same house, the same floor plan, the same square footage, and similar features and finishes. So for $550, well, maybe my house is worth $575. We're not doing that anymore. That is not the market we're in. But sellers realizing that, again, you're not pricing for a previous market, and pricing correctly today will help too.
Well, and I think the other key is the buyers actually have some time to make decisions. It's not like you saw a house and it's going to sell the first weekend. So we're seeing buyers kind of be very picky and have a little more time to kind of dive into, analyzing, is this the right neighborhood? Is it the right price? Does it have, everything that I need before just jumping on it and saying, okay, let's write an offer on the hood of your car, which is what we saw in the 05-06 market. So,
absolutely. That then led to the crash.
Yes.
That being said, too, the other thing to keep in mind in our market, it's a either heavy equity position, ownership position, or you own it outright, or you have a low interest rate, right? So we were seeing interest rates on 15-year, they were down in the 2s, and then 30 years, they were in the 3s. So if you don't need to sell, people aren't selling. You're not in that mindset of, I've been here 7 years, maybe I want another whatever, I want a little bigger, I want a little smaller. And so we're not seeing as much inventory that we did in a crash, which again, shows signs or points to a little bit more of a balance and not a crash. Okay, so what's changed, right? What has happened this year versus last year? Well, a couple of things. Yes, houses are sitting on the market a little bit longer. They're in that mid-60 range in the Prescott area, as opposed to last year sitting in the mid-70s or high 70s at 77 days on market. Different markets are different, right? So Prescott Valley year over year is down about 11.5% versus the Prescott market is about 13.8%. Days on market are a little bit shorter in Prescott Valley than they are in Prescott proper. So those are just some of the key things that have changed this year.
Well, and I think you have to look at each individual zip code too. So 86301, which is where our office is in downtown, it's up 3.5%, almost 4% year over year.
Right.
Whereas other markets within Prescott, 86305, like Williamson Valley, is down 7%. Overall, sure, when you encompass, single family homes, condos, townhomes, the entire Prescott market down almost 13.5% year over year. But there are little micro climates within the Prescott area where things actually are up. So
that's true. And Chino's sitting a little bit longer, Dewey's sitting a little bit longer. But again, they're a little bit further out from the downtown cores, and there's a reason for that.
Well, so regionally, let's talk about negotiations. So, homes are selling for about 97% of list price right now. When you look at new construction, the new construction builders are offering incentives, whether that is a rate buy down or a credit towards design upgrades, that kind of stuff. So we're seeing more negotiation from the new construction builders, same because they have to compete with the resale market. So
the other thing that we're seeing too, since we have so many people that own their homes outright, we're seeing a few more owner carry contracts, right? We just had one come across not that long ago. And so we're seeing that scenario kind of play a part in our
market. We had a couple of them earlier this year, maybe a way to kind of offset the higher interest rates, consider an owner contract. I think as Tiffany mentioned, so many of our homes are owned free and clear in this region. So we've got sellers that, can make a little bit of interest on their money and, they take a little bit of a down payment. They move that on to the next property or their next chapter in their life, and they make a bit of interest for the next 4 or 5 years. So that could be a possibility for you. All right, so let's talk about the interest rates. That's been like a thorn in everyone's side as of late, but there is some improvement. We've seen rates as of October 2025 in the low sixes, 6.2, 6.21, 6.25, somewhere around there. And it's anticipated that we'll see rates come down again, possibly as early as December. So with that encouragement of the market, we're hopeful that this will start to shift things even further to get some of this inventory off the market and buyers into homes again.
Well, and I feel too that, we've worked in all the markets, been in the market business for 23 years, right? So we've seen the ups, the downs, the ugly, and the great. And I feel like when people were jumping over each other and outbidding each other and, waiving inspections and that sort of thing, it's not a healthy market for a buyer to buy in, and sellers get stressed too, right? If you're looking at 7 different offers, you don't know which one to pick. So I feel like it was a needed reset in the Prescott market. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So next, what we're going to talk about is we're actually going to map out these areas and what this means in our Prescott market, right? The median meet in the middle of the market and the median home price. What are those things doing? The upper end, what that's seeing, and then the entry-level starter price point and how those are being affected.
Well, and even the new construction corridors. So let's kind of dive into that. So the mainstream market. Let's talk about the market under 600K.
Yeah, and this is the greater Prescott area. Let's say 400 to 600,000, lightly lived in, maybe 10 years or newer, not needing major updates, that sort of thing.
Those things are moving. They're not sitting on the market for, 120 days. We're seeing most activity kind of in that mainstream resale market. It's relatively balanced. When you look at like supply and demand, absorption rate, how long If every home on the market in that particular segment were to sell tomorrow,
and no new listings hit the market, how
Yeah.
many months of inventory we have?
correct, right. So that's the market that's probably most balanced within the whole Prescott area. And it's not too hot, not too cold. Most buyers feel like they're getting a decent price. Sellers are still negotiating. Things aren't sitting on the market for, months and months and months.
Right. If you have a specific property, right? So let's say you're on acreage and you're on the outskirts, or let's say you're in a smaller cottage style home, but you're still, again, on the outskirts of town. Those things are where we're seeing a little bit slower turn time. And the other thing too, to keep in mind is, the more unique the property, the harder it is going to be to sell in any market regardless, right?
Yeah.
As far as kind of our upper end and our luxury market, what are we seeing in that?
So that's going to be homes that we see over 800,000. We are seeing, 70 to 90 plus days on market time. They're just taking longer. Tiffany kind of touched on it a little earlier. A lot of those buyers that want to move into those particular properties, they might be coming from other markets where they're very dependent on selling their home to someone who needs to take out a mortgage. And maybe with the rates, that mortgage is just not as affordable as it was 3-4 years ago. So it's kind of a domino effect. If that seller isn't able to sell their home for what they want to be able to get out of it, they're not able to buy that next home, that retirement home, and enjoy the view that they're looking for, because they're kind of stuck, the other property.
But even that, right? Like, we're seeing just under 60 days on market, over 800,000 in the greater Prescott area. So it's not terrible by any means.
The next market segment is going to be things in town, 86301, 86303. The
Right
downtown
near Courthouse Square.
Yeah, near the Courthouse Square. The in-town older homes, the Willow Creek area. We've just had some great buyers pick up a property recently, and they, purchased a move-in ready turnkey home for sub 500,000 and, was ready to move into.
And they were able to negotiate it down a fair amount as well.
So that market is moving a little faster. We're looking at like 67, 65 days on market, particular area. And that is that little micro segment where we're actually seeing a little bit of appreciation compared to 2024. So, about 3.5%, return, which is great.
So even in those corridors, something to keep in mind, that outdated homes that need some work, that maybe have aging, HVAC and plumbing systems, electrical systems, that sort of thing, we're actually seeing those sit on the market closer to 80 plus days, right, Shawn?
Yeah. I mean, if you're move-in ready, turnkey in that particular segment, homes are moving in the 40 to 50 day range. So obviously getting your home prepared, ready to go to market, having that, annual maintenance done on your HVAC, all that kind of stuff is all going to help you move, at a much quicker time in terms of market time.
Well, and as a buyer, you have so many more options now than you have for, let's say, the last 5 years. So why wouldn't you want to pick something that was move-in ready and didn't need updating?
Exactly. So let's talk about the new construction corridors. Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Dewey Humboldt. PV is kind of leading the charge with majority of our new construction right now. We're seeing new construction in the PV market down about 11.5% year over year. Average days on market around 60. The incentives are really what is sort of driving that new construction market. We're seeing rate buy downs, of a whole point.
Yep. Design center upgrade options, some structural options. We've heard of, I haven't personally seen them, but some prepaid HOA options, that sort of thing.
We're seeing even, some lender incentives. A lot of the builders have a preferred lender. And so in that, if you use that preferred lender, that lender might credit you, towards your closing costs, or that rate buy down again, get you down into that mid 5% interest rate.
We're seeing lot premium negotiations. We've seen some of those reduced. Generally speaking, the new home builders don't reduce their prices, but you'll see those in design center incentives instead. So the builders are definitely keeping the overall supply healthy. They're offering standing inventory, spec homes that are ready to move in different stages for people that need to move in a certain time frame. And then we're also seeing people build from the ground up. They're trying to consolidate design options so that their numbers are tighter for a buyer who's very, price sensitive and wants to know what is this going to cost and what's this going to look like. So they're trying to definitely, streamline the process a little bit more just to keep numbers more in line and, just more dependable on what it's going to cost.
Well, and I think we're seeing a lot of spec inventory as well. Many builders are really getting into the spec building, so essentially they're taking one of their standard floor plans that they offer.
Yeah.
They're customizing it with, some upgrades, maybe some flooring upgrades, countertop upgrades, cabinetry.
Premium lots.
Offering it basically a complete home.
And that is also adding to our inventory numbers of what's available on the market because they're not resales, they're new construction specs, but they're adding to those numbers for sure.
Yep.
So let's talk about an inventory breakdown. Out of the two of us, I'm the MLS stalker. I look at the MLS several times a day and I like to know what's going on. Yes, we're seeing an very slight upward tick of new inventory. I've now recently, I'd say probably within the last month or so, started following pendings. And I will tell you that the pendings or things that have gone under contract are almost in line with the new listings that we're seeing come on market. So to me, that shows that, the amount of demand and need is equaling what's actively hitting the market, but we're not necessarily running through standing inventory that we have on the market. So we're not in like an overabundance of listings, but we're not in an underabundance of listings either.
No, that makes sense. And, obviously, if we'd like to see more of that inventory kind of be absorbed, because obviously the more inventory that absorbs, the lower that the days on market, we see for a lot of these sellers. It's kind of, it can be sort of frustrating for sellers because buyers have options,
and
whereas
super picky right now, as you should be. You're spending that kind of money on a house, you should be super picky in particular with what you want. Sellers got a little spoiled there for a while of, I'll just put the sign up and anybody will buy it and I'll have 4 people jumping over each other to get it. Not anymore. Buyers have the right to be picky and are taking their time and, mulling things over much longer.
So let's talk about who are the sellers in a market that we're seeing right now. You've got the equity sellers, we'll call these the homeowners that have, great equity in their homes they bought before, 2020. They're cashing out after years of appreciation. They've kind of ridden up that market. Maybe they bought in, 2016, 2017, and now they're sitting, nearly 10 years later on some good equity. Those are the sellers that we're seeing sell right now.
We're seeing the lifestyle sellers too, and those are the ones that are either needing to upsize or downsize, move closer to family, move out of the area altogether, maybe move into a condo or a patio home out of a single family residence. So we're seeing that. Distressed sales, we're not seeing very much in our market. Every once in a while, you'll see something trickle in, but those are few and far between.
It's less than 2% of our inventory in the Prescott market. The larger cities see more of that, the short sales, the foreclosures. We're just not seeing that in the Prescott market, which is, it just shows that it's a relatively healthy market from the standpoint of people do still have equity in their homes. Job losses are not forcing a sale. So
we're not seeing crazy foreclosure numbers or short sales or that sort of thing. Inventory is rising, but we're sitting at about 3.5 to 4 months of inventory. So not insane numbers by any means. All right. So the psychology of a buyer in our market has changed. We kind of touched on this a little bit. Buyers have the pick of the litter. They can choose whatever houses they want. There's more inventory. There's sellers that are more reasonable on their pricing. We're seeing more negotiations. They're not in any hurry to, jump. You're not in like, oh my gosh, we saw the house an hour ago and we have to make a decision right now. I mean, people are actually being able to make an educated decision, sit on things, see if it's the right fit for their needs, and process things in a proper fashion. I'll tell you, Shawn and I personally, we appreciate and like this market far more than what we've seen since 2020 because you shouldn't be rushed into a decision. You should be able to take your time and make an educated, purchase and decision.
Yeah, obviously purchasing a home is one of the largest financial decisions you're going to make. So having, being forced to make a decision within a matter of hours after a home you just walk through for, 10, 15 minutes,
maybe,
is ridiculous. Even during the 21, 22 year, the Prescott market wasn't like what a lot of the markets were in the larger metro areas, we weren't seeing 10, 15 offers on properties. So even then, buyers, while the days on market were a lot less, buyers still had a little more time to think about it, than they did in the, Phoenix, Scottsdale.
The major markets, for sure. I think something else too, like we've mentioned, negotiation is back. We're seeing some, not very many, but we're seeing some homes where you can use assumable financing come to market. There was this amazing, cute little house in Granville that had like a 3.25% interest rate that was assumable. That sold pretty quickly. But again, those are kind of one-off cases, right? So that's definitely changing our market too.
One stat is, nearly 1 in 4 homes that are actively on the market sees at least one price reduction before it actually goes under contract. So, from a negotiation standpoint, obviously, some of these, there's a lot of buyers that out there that just kind of like watch things.
So something else we're seeing are seller paid closing costs. We're seeing, sellers are doing a few more items on the inspection request repairs that we're seeing or that we're asking for. It used to be, well, you're going to take it as it is because if you don't want it, then somebody else will buy it without any questions. But we're not seeing that anymore, thankfully, because again, you should go into it eyes wide open and know everything that's wrong with the house before you decide to purchase. So another point that's driving the market, right? I feel people are relocating again from those higher price markets, and let's say they're selling a house for $1.5 million, right? Or $1 million. Well, they're being smart and wise with their dollars, and they're not selling for $1 million and spending $1 million. We're seeing those buyers come in the $500,000 and $600,000 range. They're more affordable options. They're more price conscious, which is definitely wiser, right? They're stashing away the money, whether that's for retirement or the next phase of life, and they're buying something that's a reasonably priced home. And so I think that's probably feeding that $400,000 to $600,000 market too. They're coming in all cash, but again, they're living well below their means. They're not overextending. They're not going out and buying like these crazy, massive houses. So I think that's definitely a key factor in our market that we're seeing too.
Okay, so let's talk about consumer confidence. It's returning, but it's been kind of slow. We're seeing more buyers enter into the marketplace, but again, they're, with so many choices, they're just being very methodical with, kind of what they're going after, what they're jumping into. We've had some buyers here recently that were looking at some new construction, and they just have a lot of choices, so they're confident in what they want. They're just being a little slower to approach, that contract table. So,
well, and I think people are, looking at, okay, if I have 3 new construction homes to choose from, I want to know what the standard fit and finish are and what's included in the purchase price. And let's walk through the models, with us and with the sales agent that represents the seller and see what those things are that they're going to have to pay more money for. And at the end of the day, they're looking for the better value. They're not necessarily looking for the lower price point, because sometimes, remember, we've talked about this in other videos, that lower price point can entice you, but you pay through the nose in upgrades. Right. They're looking for the value in the home, meaning what's included that I'm not paying for. Am I getting pavers? Am I getting covered patios? Am I getting granite or quartz countertops? Am I getting solid flooring included in my purchase price? So they're definitely more methodical with that. All right, Shawn, so what does this mean for somebody who's in the market buying or selling?
So if you're a buyer, you've got time, you have leverage, you can negotiate, you've got the inventory.
Yep.
Yes, so you can actually go out there and find what truly fits your needs. Focus on the listings that have been active for 3 weeks or longer. Chances are you're going to be able to negotiate with that particular seller. Don't jump on the first house you see 2 days on market. Obviously, you don't have that leverage as much. With the average and median, market time, the things are probably going to sit for, 30, 60, maybe 90 days.
I would also say don't discount homes like you may have previously done that were on the market longer than what you think is normal. So if you see a house that's been on whatever real estate app you're using, for 110 days, don't automatically chalk it up to something's wrong with that house, because we are seeing different things. We're seeing beautiful homes that maybe the seller thought, I'm going to price like it's 2022 and not 2025. And then they've been chasing the market to find the right price point to list it and get it sold. So definitely keep that in mind and don't discount discount that because there's some really good options on homes that have been on the market for a while. What does it mean for you if you're a seller? I'll tell you what it means. It means you don't look at comps that are 6 months old, and you don't look at comps from last year, and you don't say, again, my neighbor sold for X and my house is nicer, so I'm going to go up by $25,000. You want to be the first one to the right price point in your market. You want to definitely have your, you want to know what your competition is, but you just want to slightly undercut that competition, right? You don't want to leave money on the table and slash the prices, but you definitely want to price it appropriately and ask yourself this question at the end of the day. If my house is priced at X, let's call it $700,000, would I pay $700,000 to buy this house as a seller?
No, absolutely. Now, if you're one of those relocating buyers, 2021, you had to hop on a plane, fly out on a buying trip, spend maybe 2 days, look at 15, 20 houses,
and make a decision before you flew home.
Find 3 of them that were in your short list, offer on one, and hopefully you got it and you didn't have to. Times have changed. So now you've got a lot more time. You can spend, a couple, 2-3 days with Shawn and Tiffany, and we tour you around. We can walk some new construction. We can see some resale. We can, show you the town. But it's not going to be like at the end of that 3 days, I've got to put a contract in. Otherwise, I'm going to miss out.
Well, and you may have before, like Shawn said, you'd have a top 3, but you maybe would have only had, 5 or 6 to look at. Now you have a plethora to choose from. You're looking at spec homes from builders, and you're looking at building your own house, and you're looking at resales that may be undercutting those new home construction.
So whether you're a buyer, a seller, or relocatee in the market in 2025, it's all about strategy and over speed. The days of overpaying and being forced to make a decision
they're gone
in 10 minutes is pretty much over with. So
yeah, if you're the buyer, you're in the driver's seat for sure. So overall, the Prescott housing market did not crash. It's taken a slight reset, which was severely overdue. It is not doom and gloom. The house is not on fire. Things are not going to come to an end, and a bubble is not going to burst, right? So what this means is ultimately, if you're looking to, relocate, or you're looking to buy in the Prescott market, like I said, you're in the driver's seat. You get to control this. You get to negotiate a great price and find a great house with tons of stuff to choose from.
We're Shawn and Tiffany Danley. We're your local Prescott real estate experts, and our job is to help you understand the market of Prescott and hopefully assist in that relocation. So if you're looking to potentially make that move, give us a call, and we'll put our number down below. Download our free relocation guide. 60 pages, chock full of tons of information all about our market. We even have some of our favorite restaurants in there, some of our favorite neighborhoods. So there's a lot of things in there personally curated by Tiffany and I, and we'd love for you to take a look at it, and we're our gift to you.
Thanks for watching.